Hey there, this is Linda and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. In this video, I'm putting together week 5 in my 2023 Project Life album, and I'm going to be working with the January 2023 Stories by the Month kit from Ali Edwards. Okay, so the first thing I did after cropping out my photos was swap out this page protector. I originally had this layout right here, which has the 2 4x6 pockets and the 5 3x4 pockets, and I switched it out for one that has just 9 3x4 pockets. And I've been finding a lot this year that I'm taking almost exclusively vertical photos, and I just had one 4x6 photo, and I actually had cropped of this same photo to a 3x4 or to a vertical photo because I shared it on my stories. And that's why I have so many vertical photos, is because I'm sharing a lot more on my Instagram stories this year. And when I took this photo for stories, I remember taking a second horizontal photo thinking I need this for Project Life. So I'm happy that I have that one to put here and then my title card. And it's kind of it's a hard balance for me because I really love the 4x6 for the title cards, but I like the 3x4 for everything else. But as you can tell, once I have this one here and I flip it, next week the title card is going to have to be a 3x4. So that's just how that works out. You could probably tell from looking at what I have in this kit that I've already used this kit quite a bit. I already created 2 pages from this is the January Stories by the Month kit from Ali Edwards for 2023. And I had created 2 pages. It was my title page for this album, my Project Life album, and my title page for my Mini Me album. And I had done both of those as part of the Plan, Prep, and Play class. So there's full process videos for those over there. So what I'm trying to do now is I'm just going to lay everything out and kind of get a feel for how I want this spread to come together, what I want to be in each of the pockets, if I have photos for every pocket or something to include in every pocket. I think I'm going to have a few extra pockets here, but perfect. So I'm actually going to cut these down and put some sort of treatment in pockets. I think that'll be really great. What I do need to figure out though is kind of how I want to lay this out. But I'm going to go ahead and cut these down quickly, but I will cut them out. I'll do that on fast forward so you don't have to see me speed cutting or, fussy cutting out the shape. But I'm going to put these like that for 3 stories, which I really like that idea. This card is included in every Stories by the Month kit this year. And I like it as kind of a monthly recap. So I think I'm going to do the Stories by the Month kit similar to what I did last year and include it on the final spread for each month. Now this spread is mostly February, but I decided that I wanted to use this kit because I hadn't gotten to it yet. So I think it just works out really well. I was planning on using a different kit and I just kind of switched things up last minute. So I'm just going through the embellishments I have left. I have a couple of these little flowers. I'm thinking maybe I could put one right here on the title and then like just add something on here because these are super cute and I just kind of want to use them. Let's see, I have the stamp and then I have some chipboard pieces. So part of my goal is to just really use a lot of the pieces, right? So let's see, I've got details of right now. That's one of the big negatives I found though with the 3x4s is that there's not enough space to add a lot to it. These ones too, I struggle with to use the ones that don't have anything on them, but I think like the circles here, I like that. And I think I'm going to try to cut that off and add something on top of that. So I like that. Details of right now or a new season begins. A new season begins would be great for my calendar here. Although it does cover up part of it, but I think that I still like that. And then let's see here. This one I can put there because so this photo I originally had taken and left some white space here because what I had done was use that to add some text in an Instagram story. And a lot of these photos, I take them with the thought of posting them on stories and not really thinking about how they're going to show up in project life later. Let's see. And then I could put this for that, or this one on my daughter. I think I'm going to put it here because there's like room for it, even though I'm not really going to add journaling on that card. So that gives me something in every pocket. And then what I need to do is figure out what treatment I'm going to put behind these. So I'm thinking I want to do some sort of stamping, but I don't know that any of these stamps make sense, or some sort of like repeated treatment for all of these cards. So I'm going to go over to my stash and kind of figure out what I want to do. I do have this paper left from the kit. And I have to be honest with you, I don't absolutely love this paper. I think that this works well outside the page protector in a 6x8 album. You can add some journaling and a photo. It's almost like a postage stamp. So I might save it and do something like that, but I don't really love it, and I don't like it in the pocket pages because it's just such a large scale. I think you could kind of crop it down and fit it into a pocket page. It's going to cut it off a little bit, but you're going to have kind of that outline, which might be a little bit fun, but I think I'm going to save that and put it in a 6x8 album. So I think this is going to be my starting point. I'm going to go ahead and put you guys on fast forward, go over to my stash and figure out what I want to do on treatment on those, and then get this spread put together. Okay, so I am back. I just wanted to show you what I grabbed really quickly before I do sped up version. But I'm thinking, so I pulled over this paper, which I have in my stash, and I like the green because I think it kind of goes with that green. It's not perfect, but it goes pretty well. And I did use the same green when I use this kit in other spreads because I just like the way it looks with the kit. And I grabbed this stamp that was a Stories by the Month stamp for July 2022. And I'm thinking that I want to use like the currently and just do repeated stamping and create 3 backgrounds for those. I also was thinking I do have like navy and stuff, so I may go get some other colors and make them 3 of them different colors or all the same green. I'm not sure yet, but the first thing I want to do was kind of figure out what stories I was going to tell where. So I have this little sticky note, and this kind of goes through all of my stories for the week. And so I'm just kind of thinking about what do I really want to tell. So this one's going to be a recap of the month. So that's not necessarily going to be stuff that happened in this week. In fact, it probably won't be. So I'm thinking, what are the stories that happened this week that I need to tell? And then I also have these. So this one, I think is going to be my bullet point list of like random things. These are obviously going to be like a little bit bigger stories, not bigger, but enough to fit on one of those. And then I have this one for one other story. So I'm just looking through what I have on here. So let's see, I have just a lot of little things. So those, of course, are going to go on this one. I did 2 craft Zooms this week. So I think I'm going to make those together be one of these because I don't have any pictures that go with them. And so I'm just kind of marking them and putting one next to them. And then let's see, what else do I have on here? Legislative briefing. So that needs its own story. That's 2. And then the wind chill. So it was super, super cold this week. So that definitely needs a story. But I'm thinking, do I want to put that on one of these or do I want that to be here? I think I want it to be on this one. So I'm going to make, and then I also went for a walk on the weekend in the park. I'm going to make that my 3rd story. That goes with this picture though. So I'm probably going to actually make that number 1. And then my last story, which I had just mentioned, was the wind chill. So it was ridiculously cold. So I'm going to write story by that. And then the other little things are gonna go on this one as bullet points. So that's kind of just like where I'm starting. And I just wanted to do that first because I was thinking maybe some of these other ones might make sense. But I think currently does actually work the best for everything, all the stories I'm gonna tell. So I'm gonna go ahead and put you guys on fast forward and get to putting this spread together.
Okay, so I went back over to my stash and pulled over some other papers because I decided I didn't want quite that much green. So I chose 3 different colors that I felt went with this kit. There's a navy, a pink, and then of course the green. And I'm just using my ruler here to draw some lines to just kind of get an idea of how big a 3x4 card will be on each of these, because I'm going to do some repeated stamping backgrounds and then I'm going to cut it out after I do the stamping. So this is the most time-consuming part of my page. And what I'm doing is I took this currently stamp and I'm just stamping a repeated pattern on each of the colors using the watermark ink. And then I'm going to use white embossing powder and heat emboss on each of these to make this repeated pattern that just says currently over and over again. So as you can see, I just kind of eyeballed how much I would need using those guidelines from the pencil to figure out, about how large it's going to be. And then I'm just heat embossing it. And you saw I flipped the page over there. I do that a little bit while heat embossing to keep the paper from curling. If it starts to curl when I flip it over and put the heat on the back, it will make the paper curl back the other direction. And I just do each page one at a time. I did the green, and then I'm going to do the pink, and then I'm going to do the navy. And I'm just following this exact same formula. This is a little bit time consuming and a little bit messy, but it's fun. And I really love the look that you get. One thing that I don't love about the heat embossing is that it creates a lot of texture, which is very nice in terms of look, but it makes the card very bulky. So it takes up space in the pocket. And then when you try to adhere stuff down on it, rolling adhesive doesn't work super well on top of the heat embossing. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're going to use a similar technique. The stamping, of course, is going to be kind of messy when you do something like this. I always kind of tell myself if I want perfect stamping, I'm going to use digital stamps because then I can get a perfect pattern. Using the heat embossing gives you that texture, but it also gives you kind of that fun, imperfect look with the fact that it's not going to be fully stamped straight, or the heat embossing powder is not going to cover everything perfectly. And it's just a great technique that I use again and again in a lot of my projects. And you can see I'm kind of running low on the white embossing powder here. If you're purchasing embossing powder, you need to make sure that you look for the white opaque embossing powder, because there's also clear embossing powder that looks exactly the same before it's heat embossed, but once you emboss it, it is not white. It will be clear, and so it would be a very different look. You can see the white just kind of popping out as I heat emboss it, and it does, you can see later in the video, I didn't get it all perfect because around the edges, there was part that was like going off the page of where I was going to crop it out. So I just didn't waste my time with it. And then what I ended up doing is I cleaned off my stamp there, and then I waited for these to cool for a little bit because they are a little hot after you do the heat embossing and the embossing powder is still a little wet. And once it's fully dry, I cropped them out, and then I'm just using my heat gun again to make sure that the edges are all perfectly embossed, because there were definitely some parts that I didn't get all of the embossing powder. And if you don't get it all with the heat gun, then it's just kind of like a loose powder that's going to flake off. So it's important to kind of make sure that the entire thing is heat embossed. The green one here, you can see I ended up not stamping it perfectly. I just didn't go down low enough on the page, so there's some empty spots there. I could have gone back and added a few more stamps, but I decided that it was close enough that I'm just going to embrace the imperfection and leave it that way. Next, what I did was I'm cutting out all of these tags. So I'm just, fussy cutting around the edge of the tag, and then I'm going to pair each tag with one of the cards. And then I'm using my crocodile to punch the hole in the top of each tag just to give it a little bit more dimension. I considered getting some twine or like embroidery floss and adding that to the hole punch on each of these tags, but I decided against it ultimately because the one on the left hand side there is going to go inside the pocket on the back of a page protector, so the pocket's not open on the front, so it wouldn't be able to stick out of the top of the pocket. If that makes any sense, I would have had to like cut a slit in the pocket, and it just didn't seem worth it. So I ended up just leaving them without any embroidery floss on there. So if you saw in the beginning of the video, I had 2 of these vellum flowers left. I used the rest of the set in my previous projects. So I decided to add them onto 2 of the cards, and I just go ahead and take this over to my sewing machine and stitch it in place. And then I'm just pulling the thread through the back, and then I'm going to tape it down on the back side of the paper. And that just adds a little bit more texture. I really love using my sewing machine a lot on my project to just kind of adhere things down and add to my embellishment clusters. I also used my rolling date stamp and one of the word phrase strips from the kit to add to that title card. And then I added one of the chipboard pieces onto that photo, and I'm just kind of going through and filling in card by card. For these tags, I'm doing my journaling before I adhere them down on the embossing powder because those heat embossed cards have texture, like I said, and it would be very difficult to write on top of it. It's kind of hard to see what I'm doing here, but I had pulled some tags out of my stash thinking I might want to layer some additional tags on the card, but I decided against it. It just didn't look right. It was a little too busy, and I'm happy with how it ended up turning out. I adhered that circle chipboard piece going off the page there, and I like the repetition of the circles. And then I'm just stacking some word phrase strips. I went over to my stash and pulled a white sheet of word phrase strips that had to do with food because there were a few different food related photos on this page. And I thought that it would add something with the sentiments and then bringing in the color white. On this photo here of my cat in the laundry basket, I went and got a pen. This is an acrylograph pen from Archer and Olive, which is kind of like a paint pen, and used that to add some text on top of the photo. I really like these pens for journaling on photos, but they are very thick. So if you watched one of my previous videos, I talked about how I don't have a great pen for journaling on photos for the regular pen size, but I did get a lot of suggestions on that video, so I'm definitely going to order something, and I will be able to show you it in a future video. I'm going ahead and adding my journaling onto the second tag here and just adhering it down and just going card by card, adding things down. Again, adding some word phrase strips and just pairing some of the pink ones with the white ones. These word phrase strip sheets last forever. So it's one of those things that I just always want to use as many as I can to try to use them up. But also I'm going off of the sentiments and just trying to add a little bit more to the story. On this card here, I'm journaling about how we had a ridiculous cold spell where I live in upstate New York. We do tend to get some single digits, occasionally negatives in the winter, but it's usually only a couple times a year. And this was unusually cold, probably the coldest I've ever experienced in this area, maybe overall. It was -11, but with a wind chill of -24, and it was very, very brutal out. I also told the story of how my daughter finally admitted it was time to pull out the hat and scarf because she, for whatever reason, teenagers are opposed to wearing outerwear. So I told that story and I snapped a photo of her with her hat and scarf on there. I'm going ahead and adding my journaling onto this last tag, and this was just about a story from work. I did a legislative briefing, so I'm just kind of saying a little bit about that story. For my work stories, I tend to not include a ton in my project life because a lot of it is confidential, and I generally have no photos from work, but when there's something a little bit more important, or, that makes a bigger impact in my life, I like to make a note of it because it is part of the larger story. For this card here, I decided to make my bullet points kind of indented a bit. I don't know why I decided to do that. I thought it would be a fun kind of design. But once I did it, I decided that it looked a little imbalanced. So what I ended up doing was going to the stamp set from the kit, and there's a stamp that says 2023 in that same font as the collect moments. And I just added that in the bottom left-hand corner there. The 2023, I don't think is necessarily the best sentiment for that card, but I do really like the design of it. So I was very happy with how that turned out. Finally, what I'm going to do last is this recap card, and I'm just adding journaling of 3 stories that were kind of highlights from the month of January. I just kind of was going off of my memory, and I like that I'm going to have this repetition throughout my album. I did something similar in my 2022 album, and I'm happy to continue it on into 2023. Finally, I decided the spread was done, so I'm just going to go ahead and put everything in the pockets. A lot of the cards and photos end up having to get trimmed down, and I was kind of just rearranging everything a little bit because I wanted to try to balance out the colors, balance out the cards with the photos, and pair certain things together that had to go together, like this one, the story about the cold, I wanted next to the photo of my daughter wearing her hat and scarf. And I also wanted it next to the screenshot of the weather app. Moving on to the left-hand side of the spread, I again had to trim a few of the cards down, but pretty much everything fits in here. And I love just kind of slipping it all into the pocket and calling it done. So that's the end of my spread. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please let me know down below if you have any questions or comments. And here's one final look at that completed spread. And thank you guys so much for being here, and I will see you all in the next one.